Breaking news to kick us off on NFL Live. Big trade made today. Adam Schefter, what do we need to know?
Dan Graziano, David Montgomery is on his way to the Houston Texans to become the solution in the backfield that they have been looking for. He's been matched up and teamed up with Jahmyr Gibbs, but he turns 29 this offseason. He was looking for more work as part of the contract extension that he signed recently. The Houston Texans will give it to him, and there is the compensation, with the Lions getting back a 4th-round pick this year, a 7th-round pick in 27, and offensive lineman Juice Scruggs. So essentially, the Texans give up 3 components to get a player that they believe will solve their running game. Let's keep in mind, Nick Chubb is on an expiring contract and is a free agent. Woody Marks showed great promise as a rookie, and now the plan will be to have David Montgomery as the lead back, somebody who should improve the Texans' red zone play in addition with Woody Marks, and that is the type of rushing attack that C.J. Stroud has needed and been looking for in Houston.
Yeah, Joe Mixon unable to play this past year due to injury, so Texans adding a key piece there. Montgomery was in Detroit for 3 seasons, was over 1,000 yards in his first one, but his carries and yards per game both dropped off in the last 2. Last year he had 6 fewer carries and 30 fewer yards per game than he did in 2023, and he ran for 8 touchdowns, which is pretty good, but he had at least 12 in each of his first 2 seasons with Detroit. Welcome into NFL Live. Dan Graziano here with Dan Orlovsky. You heard from Adam. We have Mina Kimes, there she is, on the show today as well. Dan, let's start with the Houston side of things. What do you think of this move for the Texans?
Yeah, I like it for Houston. It puts a giant question mark on the future of Joe Mixon, who was there early on a couple years ago. His first year with Houston was great, and it's kind of been we haven't seen him play in at least a season. I think Adam intimated if you were going to ask me the one glaring issue for last year when it comes to Houston's offense, just in situational football, they were so bad down in the low red zone short area. I mean, so often it was 1st and goal at the 1-yard line, and they could not find a way to get the ball into the end zone. David Montgomery is still a very good back, short yardage situations. I would love to see Houston and their offense kind of develop a little bit of the identity that he ran with in Detroit. Detroit, it was downhill run game, downhill run game, downhill run game. That's kind of what I want to see Houston to adapt. So from a Houston perspective, I think what they gave up, it does make sense. I don't love the fact that they've moved off of 2 offensive linemen today, but I do like the fact that they've added a power back.
I like the back. I'll start here. I echo a lot of what Dan said. I think he's versatile. We talk about him running between the tackles in the red zone. He can also pass protect and catch passes. You know, it wasn't something he was asked to do as much in Detroit with the ascent of Gibbs. But if you go back to his time in Chicago, the last 3 seasons, he caught over 300 yards receiving in all 3. So I think that's something that's been an element needed also for this Houston offense. The advanced stats also like him. I always like to look at rushing yards over expected per carry, which tries to isolate what a back does separate from their blocking. And he was 11th amongst all running backs, high volume backs in that regard last season. But, and this also echoes what Dan said, the offensive line is a massive concern. It feels like, much like last offseason, they're almost wiping the slate clean and saying, we're going to start over for much of this position group, which is fine, but you tried that last year, and it took a second. And I'm not saying, you know, Scruggs probably necessarily was someone you wanted to keep. Howard, I feel a little bit more positive about. Yeah. But you're asking this front office to once again rebuild a lot of this offensive line. And if they're not successful in doing so, I wouldn't be surprised if this run game struggles just like it did for most of last year.
Amina referencing Titus Howard, Houston agreeing to trade him to the Browns earlier today. So, well, I mean, they did do this last year. They completely overhauled the offensive line. Wasn't good enough in 2024, but it also wasn't good enough in 25. So what do they need to do there?
I think that, listen, the offensive line was better in 25 than it was in 24. Neither of us are saying here that this was, you know, the best offensive line in football. They were really bad in 24. They got periodically better throughout 25. I also think the scheme under Nick Caley got a little bit more repetitive and complementary to their people. This is an offensive line. I think what you're starting to see, and we watched it last year throughout the season. They started to figure out who they wanted to be run game wise. It was a little bit of a mirror to what the Los Angeles Rams became last year. I think this, once again, the addition of David Montgomery reaffirms that. but they need to add probably 2 good starting offensive line pieces to this unit.
Yeah, Dan's right. The offensive line did play better. The run blocking did improve as the year went on, as they become more of a downhill run game, which, by the way, Montgomery is a good fit for. I'm looking at this draft right now, and it is a very strong offensive line draft, in my opinion. So I think there's potential there for them, and maybe not even staying put at 28 if there's a player that they really like being a little bit active. But that is something that has to be addressed for sure. It is the #1 priority for this football team right now.
Adam, you want a final word on this one?
Well, 2 other things that I think are pertinent to running backs in their respective cities right now. We brought up Joe Mixon's name, and I don't think that he's expected to be back in Houston for another season. Obviously missed last year with the ankle, foot injury, whatever it was. Always a great mystery surrounding Joe Mixon, and as productive as he's been in Houston and Cincinnati, it certainly sounds like the Texans are moving on from him. And in Detroit, without David Montgomery, here's a leader. Here's somebody who is very productive, somebody very popular. They're without him right now. And the focus is going to be on Jahmyr Gibbs. And this team is going to look to sign him to a contract extension this offseason. They could look to add multi-years to his deal, lucrative extension for one of the most explosive players in all of football. So it looks like Gibbs gets more time in Detroit on a bigger deal. Mixon's time in Houston is coming to an end. And David Montgomery is now going to spearhead the Texans' rushing attack into 2026.
Montgomery had 33 rushing touchdowns in his 3 seasons with Detroit. Over that same period of time, the Houston Texans, as a team, had 34 rushing touchdowns. So he does seem to be something they need. Just inside 24 hours now till the deadline for teams to put the franchise tag on players. We've seen a couple already. Adam, who are the names we should be focusing on here over the next 24 hours?
Well, I think there's some questions about who's going to get tagged right now. We'll start in Indianapolis. The Colts are trying to get Daniel Jones signed to a long-term deal. If they don't, I think the transition tag could very much be in play here for the Indianapolis Colts. That would be about $8 million less than the franchise tag, but the Colts have 2 players they really want to keep. Alec Pierce, the wide receiver, Daniel Jones, the quarterback. We'll see how they decide to figure it out here in the next 24 hours. Meanwhile, the New York Jets don't expect to let Breece Hall get out of their building, and they're talking about tagging him if they can't get done a long-term deal. I would think it would be a franchise tag. I know people have brought up the transition tag. I think if they're going to tag Breece Hall, it's probably going to be with a franchise tag, but they're trying to get a deal done by the 4 p.m. Eastern deadline tomorrow. And as for the Seattle Seahawks and the Super Bowl MVP, Kenneth Walker, as we said last week, a couple of weeks ago, unlikely that they're going to tag him. It's looking like he's going to be allowed to test the free agent market. The Seahawks have so many players that they need to retain. They want to re-sign Jackson Smith-Njigba. They want to re-sign Devin Witherspoon. They want to keep together their core. And running backs, as much as they like Kenneth Walker and as much as they know he meant to this team, there's so many needs that have to be addressed and only so many dollars you have to spend, which could result in Walker not being tagged and being allowed to truly test the free agent market next week.
We saw Monte Williams in Dallas, but it sounds like Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker in line to get even more than he got, especially if they hit the open market. Mina, what do you think the market looks like for Ken Walker?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he wants and whether or not any team's willing to meet it, especially as you look at the Javonte Williams deal, which was about $8 million per year, right? If Walker wants twice that, and same with Hall, which is a bit more than the tag, that's a tough choice for a team to make. There's a lot of really good, I would call them middle-class free agent running backs. Kenny Gainwell, Tyler Algier, Rico Dowdle, for example, and to pay a premium at the position for a player who's explosive in Walker, but maybe not necessarily efficient, it's going to take a specific type of team that not only has money, but I would say doesn't have many other needs on their roster, competing needs that they want to spend that money on.
Yeah. Jacksonville comes to mind as a potential team if it's not Seattle. I'd also say the Kansas City Chiefs, Carolina Panthers, because of Rico being a free agent. I think the Panthers are interesting for going up and get Jeremiah Love, and we'll get that later in the show as well. But Kenneth Walker's a good back. And, you know, Jacksonville, Travis Etienne is a free agent. And so you're looking at teams that have, you know, these free agent backs that are in good places. I think it's going to come down to Mina's point of like, okay, what back gets what? Is there more money somewhere else? And is there an emotional attachment or a feeling like, oh, you didn't give me what I wanted, this other organization will? Because there's this kind of group of Rico Dowdle, Kenneth Walker, Travis Etienne, probably Walker at the very top of that list. But this is a kind of a group that's going to have to find a home for each other. And I think he'll have a good market. I'd like to see him back in Seattle, but we'll see how much he costs.
We will. Last year, only 2 players got franchise tagged. It was T. Higgins in Cincinnati and Trey Smith, the Kansas City Chiefs guard. Both of them got signed to long-term deals, so nobody had to play on the franchise tag. That's down. There were 8 tags issued in the 2024 offseason and 14 in 2020. 2 is the lowest number since the franchise tag was introduced, or tied the lowest number since the franchise tag was introduced in 1993. So, yeah, we'll see how many more get used in addition to the 2 that I already have. I want to welcome